Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. Today we're out in the barn. I have a little bit of shop maintenance that I need to do. It's going to be a bit of a quick project. Mainly I just want to get it done because it's cold out here and I want to be able to start a fire and get warm. But we have to do some TLC here to the wood stove here in the barn. And what that's going to be is just some repair work surrounding this wood stove ending up overfiring a couple of times. I'll get more into detail how exactly that happened. But just like I said, just a little bit of repair work and some TLC that needs to be done while we're in here so I can go ahead and continue using this wood stove for the remainder of the winter. So stick around for that. So this wood stove was already here when we bought the property. It was already out here in the barn and it was already in a state of being pretty well used, pretty old. And one thing that I always had issues with, even from the very beginning, was the damper here. It didn't like to stay in position. And last year I was using the wood stove. I had got a nice fire going. I had turned everything down, closed the damper down, and just had, just a good low fire going to warm it up out here. And I went inside to let it warm up, and this kind of got a mind of its own, and it decided to open the damper right up. It flipped, and this ended up overfiring. And when it overfired, it actually heated the damper rod here that runs all the way through to the point where if you look at it head on, you can actually see that it sags in the middle. It heated everything up cherry red. And I continued to use it for the remainder of the winter. It worked out fine. I just really had to keep an eye on it. But the one thing that I lost the ability to do was to confidently be able to turn the damper. You really can't feel where it's shut and when it's open, and the rod would sometimes just want to spin all the way around. I tried to just do a quick fix over the summer. I separated the piping, I got in there, and I used some bolts and some washers to try to clamp the rod to the cast iron damper that's in there. It worked okay up until about a week ago, and the same problem happened, especially with it now being clamped in place. You can't use the spring function here, which is meant to hold the damper in the position you want it. And the same exact thing happened. I had the damper set down low, stepped away for a while, and then it opened right up and really overfired this, and I didn't realize it in time. We damaged some things. So if I'm gonna keep using this with some good peace of mind knowing that I can have a safe fire out here, we need to do three things. We're going to be replacing all of this stovepipe. This is 8-inch single-walled stovepipe, at least up until it gets to the ceiling, and we'll see that as I do the work here. But this is old, it's crusty. There was a leak at one point. I've repaired it since, and you can kind of see the rustiness. Water was coming down, so these are rusty, they're old. They've been overfired several times. They just need to be replaced. Obviously the damper shot. I got a new damper we're going to be putting in there. And then in just a second, I'm going to take you inside the actual wood stove. It was overfired to the point where the steel damper plate that sits down inside the wood stove, just above where you load the firebox, that actually heated cherry red and began to sag as it softened. So we need to get that straightened as well. So let's go ahead and let's just dive right in. So now just shining some light up in there, you can see in the very center of the firebox back there, the melted damper plate that began to sag. So I'm gonna go ahead and get in there. We'll get that out, and then I think what I'm gonna do, because it is pretty cold out there, we're slightly above freezing right now. We're about 35 degrees out here in the barn. I don't wanna try hammering it out with it that cold because I don't wanna risk breaking it. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set it up somewhere, get my heat gun set up, and just point some heat at it while I do the rest of the work. Get that thing nice and warm, at least to the point where I can have some peace of mind that I'm not gonna fatigue the metal and break it, because I only have one piece. I could always get a new piece, but I have some work I wanna do out here later today as well as tomorrow, and that's gonna take time and I won't be able to get that work done. So just to play it safe, we're gonna warm it up first, and then we'll try to hammer it flat and get it back in there. And you can see just how warped and bent that is. So let's get this set up and get some heat into it. All right, so I just set this up here. The steel plate's on top, and I've got the heat gun running underneath. And again, I'm not trying to achieve what you would get with a torch or anything like that. I'm not trying to get this cherry red. I just want to take the cold out of it, get it warmed up, just out of an abundance of caution so that the steel's a little bit more malleable. I don't want to risk this just getting a stress fracture and cracking or something like that. If I can get it nice and warmed up, I think we should just be able to smash this back into place with a sledgehammer. And so while we're waiting for that to heat up, I'm gonna go ahead and get all this old stovepipe out of here. All right, and so I think this is about warmed up as it's gonna get, so let's just go ahead and take care of this now and see if we can't get this straightened out. All right, and so after I got it about as flat as I could get it on the floor, I went ahead and I just took it over to the vise, and I worked it a little bit more in the vise. By no means is it perfect, but it's a heck of a lot straighter than it was, so we can go ahead and get that placed back in there and work on getting the new stovepipe and the new damper installed. All right, and so one thing that you may have noticed when I was taking the old pipe off is this bottom pipe here that had the damper in it was actually installed upside down, or at least in the wrong direction, where it slotted over the outlet on the stove. That's simply because these older stoves, the outlet here wasn't made to accommodate this crimped end that's meant to go down inside of there. It's just simply too large. So they do make what's called a skirted adapter, but they're a little expensive. The one I saw on Amazon was like 50 bucks. And then it was about a week delivery time on that, and I don't have anything local that carried anything like that. And one thing to note when you install the stovepipe that might seem counterintuitive in terms of what you just might first off the top of your head think is correct in terms of flow, you are meant to put the crimped male end down inside of the stove. Those gaps that you might in your head think might leak a little bit of smoke out, once you get a draft going through these pipes, it's not an issue at all. And the reason why you want them facing down is as your wood fire inevitably cools down, it collects creosote in a liquid form, which will then solidify. And if they're facing the other direction, you'll start to get these creosote drips that come down your stovepipe, and you don't want that. You want everything to kind of just stay contained within the inside of the wood stove and the pipes. So that's why the crimped male end goes down. However, our crimped male end won't fit into here. So what we just need to do is we need to create our own skirted adapter since we didn't have anything available. So I just roughly eyeballed a section of the old stovepipe that we removed. I cut that off. We're just gonna simply expand this out as much as we need to get it to slip over this collar, and then our male end here will then slip down into the top of that. We're gonna go ahead and get this skirt on there first, but before we go ahead and install this bottom pipe, we will have to go ahead and install that damper. All right, so now we need to go ahead and we need to install our damper. And to do that, we have to install 2 holes on either side of this pipe. I'm just copying it off the old pipe that was already there, and I know that the old one was 4 inches down, so I measured down 4 inches on one side, and the rest of this I really just kind of eyeballed as close as I could. So I came up from there, I put a mark here, I laid my damper across the top so that it was centered in the hole, and then on this opposite side over here is where I marked where the other side of that damper laid across the top, measured down 4 inches, and gave myself this mark here. And now we just need to drill 2 holes that's going to allow the rod for that damper to pass through. Now we can go ahead and get that damper plate installed. So first we want to go ahead and disassemble the damper. Just push in on it. Once you push in on it, you can twist it, and then that'll let the whole rod come out. Align it down in there. Come from the outside on one side of the pipe. And then when you get to that little curved part on there, that's where it kind of gets a little bit tricky, because you got to get that curved part through, but it's not impossible. And once that curved part's through, line it up on the other side. We can get that all the way through. Just like before, we'll flip that notch part upside down, put some pressure on it, turn it back, and then put it back into that position that it was in. And then one thing that I noticed when I got this new one installed, you can see it's not centered in the pipe. I'm by no means a wood stove installation expert, but I did some digging around the internet, and it just appears that that's just sort of the way that they look, the way that they go in. It's not the end of the world. Even with the damper closed, you do need some flow. You're not trying to completely block the pipe off, obviously, but you do want it pressed to this side, because that's what allows this spring on the outside here to hold that damper, so you can actually have just sort of various intermediate levels of dampening between fully open and fully closed. And then of course you can push in on the spring, and then that allows everything to move real freely. You let go, and then that spring holds tension. You can keep that damper wherever you want. So now we can go ahead and install this first section of pipe. All right, so this first pipe actually gave me a bit of trouble. I'm not really sure if this older pipe maybe is just slightly too small, but it took me quite a bit of work to get the pipe in there, and then I had to put a block up on the very top of it so I didn't damage it, and just kind of hammer it down into place. But it's in there nice and secure. We got some fasteners in there, and now we can start assembling the remaining pieces of pipe. But instead of working straight up from the bottom, we need to create space enough for this to go together. So all the way up there at the ceiling, that stainless part that comes down from the double walled section that goes up through the ceiling, we're gonna slip our highest piece, we're gonna slip that up and over, and then that'll give us enough room once we get the bottom two pieces in there, then we can slide that back down and fit them together. All right, so that was easier said than done, but I did get it in there. This new stack of pipe, and I don't know if maybe it's because that collar I put down there in the bottom is significantly taller. I had just enough room to squeeze that top one in, and then that created a really tight fit up here to try to fit them together and slide it down at the same time. But we got there. It just took some wrestling to get a hold of it, but now we can go ahead and throw about 3 self-tapping screws in each section just to get everything secured together, and we can wrap this up. So that's all the piping in place. I don't know if you can tell on camera as I go up here, the stove is not perfectly centered on the floor down from the ceiling. I thought about moving it. I did try smacking the boards with a sledgehammer to try to just jog it that way a little bit. It doesn't want to move. This thing is super heavy. So it's not going to affect functionality at all. It's just to the eye you can notice that the pipes aren't perfectly straight up and down, but it is what it is. This is just an old wood stove used to heat the shop out here when I need some heat during the winter. So now really all there is to do is start a fire in it. I imagine there's probably going to be some junk that needs to burn off, and then I'll probably just get some high temp barbecue paint or whatever and paint that collar. Not that it needs it, it's just now that all that pipe is new and the black color there, it'd be nice for that to match. So that's about all there is left to do for this. And then there is still a good amount of double walled pipe that continues up through the empty area above the ceiling in the shop and then up through the roof of the pole barn. So I won't do it now, but in the spring I will probably come back through with a brush and we'll get that swept out, because it hasn't been swept since we moved in, which was about 5 years ago. So I'm sure I could use it. So that's gonna go ahead and wrap this video up, guys. As always, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.